Akron 911.
Well, I got a fire going on Fulton Avenue. It's fully engulfed. I think there's people in the house. It's blazing, man. It's blazing. It's up here quick. I can feel the heat. The lights are going out. It's burning quick, man. If somebody's in there, they're dead, man.
At 3:30 a.m. in the serene neighborhood of Akron, most residents are sound asleep, oblivious to the lurking dangers in the darkness. This tranquil hour is so quiet that even the faintest noise stands out. However, tonight, an ominous event is taking place. A man clad in a dark jumpsuit approaches an unremarkable house, his footsteps the sole interruption of the night's stillness. Each step is deliberate, each action meticulously planned. Soon, the serenity of the night is shattered, transforming what was once peaceful into a scene of horror.
Oh my God. Hurry, please. Oh, Jesus, the whole house is on fire.
Firefighters, summoned by urgent 911 calls.
Akron 911.
This is 725, it's next door. I can feel the heat, the lights are going out. It's burning quick, man. If somebody's in there, they're dead, man. You keep it up here real quick.
Hey, they're on their way right now.
Hurry to the location, unaware of the true peril that awaits them. They are about to encounter a nightmare that transcends the typical fires they are accustomed to battling. This is not merely a fire. It marks the onset of a far more sinister threat. A wave of destruction that will haunt the city in the coming months. Unbeknownst to them, they are confronting a merciless killer, a cold and calculating serial arsonist, whose appetite for chaos has only just begun. The individual orchestrating this terror is far more perilous than they could ever conceive. Detectives now find themselves in a race against time, striving to reveal the monstrous entity concealed within their own community. This perpetrator is not an ordinary criminal. He is methodical, patient, and in pursuit of his next targets. With each new blaze, he leaves a path of ruin, and every fire brings them closer to uncovering the disturbed mind of the individual responsible. On April 17, 2016, 66-year-old Lindell Lewis anticipated a typical evening, one of tranquility and rest following his recent hip replacement surgery. His girlfriend, Gloria G. Hart, was by his side, attending to his needs at their residence on 719 Fulton Street. The night was peaceful and uneventful, with no indication that their calm would soon be disrupted. Unbeknownst to them, this seemingly quiet night would soon plunge the city of Akron into an unprecedented nightmare. In the early hours of April 18, around 3:33 a.m., the tranquility of the neighborhood was shattered by the unsettling image of a shadowy figure captured on CCTV. This figure approached Lindell's home with calculated movements, shrouded in secrecy. The initial signs of impending disaster were unfolding before their eyes. Moments later, tragedy struck as the man, with clear intent, attempted to ignite the house. His first attempt failed to catch fire, prompting him to flee momentarily. However, he returned shortly after, resolute in his mission. By 3:40 a.m., flames erupted, engulfing the house in a fierce blaze. It was a Monday morning, and most of the neighborhood remained fast asleep, oblivious to the horrors occurring just a few houses away. No one was awake to witness the conflagration, or to identify the masked assailant who had targeted Lindell and Gloria. The most chilling aspect of this attack was not merely the violent nature of the fire, but the realization that the perpetrator was fully aware of his intended victims. Lindell, still in recovery from surgery, was unable to escape, leaving him trapped with no hope of survival. The fire was not a mere accident. It was a calculated act, executed with the cold awareness that Lindell would be unable to escape. The perpetrator had meticulously selected his target, ensuring that escape routes were effectively blocked. By the time emergency calls began to pour in, it was already too late. The flames consumed the structure, leaving Lindell and Gloria trapped in their bathroom, crying out for assistance, their pleas drowned out by smoke and turmoil. Despite the courageous attempts of first responders, both Lindell and Gloria perished. In the devastating inferno, the city of Akron had never encountered such a tragedy. They had not only witnessed a catastrophic fire, but were now faced with the presence of an arsonist, a serial killer at large, with no indication of where he might strike next. Lindell and Gloria were merely the initial casualties in what would soon evolve into a series of unfortunate events. The pursuit of the assailant commenced, demanding all the resources and determination of the detectives involved to achieve justice. A significant breakthrough in the case occurred when detectives were able to trace the suspect's escape route, leading them to a vicinity where the killer was likely residing. The investigation then took an unexpected turn, directing attention towards Stanley Ford, Lindell's neighbor. Stanley was a man often regarded as eccentric, known for his unusual behavior and his frequent claims of being a guardian sent by God, as he spent most nights patrolling the neighborhood, seemingly fulfilling a self-imposed duty to safeguard it. Stanley had been a neighbor to Lindell for many years, and when detectives notified him of Lindell's passing, they anticipated a reaction, filled with sorrow. However, they were met with a response that was far more disconcerting, one that seemed out of place given the circumstances. His demeanor was oddly detached, as if he experienced no genuine sense of loss.
I was calling to follow up with you about the fire across the street. You know, because of the tumultuous history that you and the people in Lindell's house had, everybody is thinking you.
At this point, Stanley had not yet been identified as a primary suspect, but the detectives were not inclined to dismiss him. They required additional information.
Tanisha, you either take my word or you don't. That's all I can tell you.
Well, we do have another option.
What's that?
The polygraph.
And even more alarming was his refusal to undergo a polygraph test when it was proposed. Lindell had provided shelter to two individuals, Thomas Hughley and Garrett, who were both residing in Lindell's basement due to financial difficulties. Thomas, who had been at the residence that night, managed to escape the fire, while Garrett was absent during the incident. The investigation swiftly shifted focus to Garrett, and by April 22nd, detectives were keen to bring him in for interrogation. Might Garrett possess the crucial information needed to unravel the truth behind the events?
First, I hadn't seen or heard from you, so I waited.
Yeah, I was there earlier that day because I was over my auntie's house.
January 23, 2017, merely a few blocks from the site of the initial fire, a vehicle was ignited at 723 Russell Avenue. Although this incident appeared to be an isolated event at first, it soon became evident to investigators that the arsonist had returned. A sense of foreboding began to infiltrate the minds of the residents. The perpetrator was still at large, and uncertainty loomed over when or where the next attack would occur. On May 15, 2017, a tragic event escalated to a horrifying climax. At around 3 a.m., the normally peaceful Lane Western neighborhood was abruptly disturbed by the crackling of flames as a residence at 693 Fultz Avenue was consumed by fire. The heat was so severe that it caused the staircase to disintegrate, trapping the family within. Among the deceased were 35-year-old Dennis Huggins, 38-year-old Angela Boggs, and their 5 children, whose ages ranged from merely 16 months to 14 years.
Multiple people are dead after a house fire in Akron this morning, and at least some were children.
The Akron Fire Department says the home was fully engulfed when they arrived.
The fire originated from trash cans situated outside the house, but it was not an accident. Forensic investigations revealed the presence of gasoline, a lethal accelerant, confirming that this fire, similar to previous incidents, was intentionally ignited.
The heat was so high, a staircase melted away. The exact number of victims has not been released.
The victims, innocent adults and children, were unable to flee, ensnared by the intense heat and choking smoke. Their remains were so severely charred that identification could only be achieved through DNA analysis. This second incident was even more horrific than the first, prompting investigators to act swiftly to prevent the perpetrator from striking again. The investigation shifted focus to 2 possible suspects, Patrick Boggs, Angela's former spouse with a history of violence, and Stanley Ford. Patrick's criminal record included a 12-year prison sentence for a prior attempt to set Angela ablaze, rendering him a viable suspect. However, after polygraph examinations and surveillance footage exonerated Patrick, the investigation returned to Stanley Ford. Stanley, who resided adjacent to both Lindell Lewis and the victims of the second fire, once again became the focal point of the inquiry. A search warrant executed at his residence yielded significant evidence.
They treat me like I'm a suspect, man. I'm not a suspect.
A pair of gasoline-soaked tennis shoes. What transpired next was even more disturbing. A detective, intent on obtaining a confession, opted to engage Stanley in a private discussion within his vehicle. What Stanley revealed next was profoundly unsettling. His rationale for the deaths of innocent individuals was chillingly self-justified.
Listen to what I'm saying. You mentioned some things last night about some bad people at the house, or...
He firmly believed that he had been selected by a higher authority to cleanse the neighborhood of undesirable individuals. Stanley proclaimed himself the protector of the streets.
The stuff they was just doing immature stuff in the neighborhood. Like what? Shit, kicking vehicles, rearview mirrors, busting them out and stuff like that.
And with a warped sense of divine mission, he acted upon that conviction. Stanley's hostility towards his neighbors was widely recognized. He had long accused them of various offenses, including drug trafficking and vandalism of his property. His animosity reached a boiling point, and neighbors recalled witnessing him surveilling the victim's residence on the night of the fire. Subsequent CCTV footage corroborated this, depicting Stanley approaching the house prior to the fire and fleeing moments afterward. This discovery was the crucial link in the investigation. The unique manner in which Stanley walked, recorded in both instances, matched flawlessly. The evidence was irrefutable. Stanley Ford was the arsonist accountable for the deaths of 9 individuals. With the accumulating evidence against him, Stanley was called in for questioning. As detectives presented him with the footage and the substantial evidence of his culpability, Stanley's defenses began to falter. However, he steadfastly refused to acknowledge his crimes. He continued to deny his involvement, even as the reality confronted him directly. "We need to have a conversation, Stanley. Please be truthful with us," one detective initiated, attempting to penetrate his denial.
"We want to talk to you. I want you to be honest with me." "Okay. I've been honest. Let's talk about the day in question. Let's go back to the fire. What about it?"
"I have no knowledge of the fire. I occasionally experience Charlie horses and walk the streets, but I did not do that," he asserted.
I mean, what can you tell us about the fire? I don't have no knowledge of that. So what's the...
His tone becoming increasingly defensive with each moment. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Stanley persisted in his denial.
Running back to the house. Mm-hmm. At the time of the fire. Okay. Right. We got you running to the house. You're not asleep. You weren't.
Yet Stanley remained obstinate. He clung to his innocence, unwilling to concede his part in the tragic deaths of those families. Nevertheless, the detectives were aware of the truth, and they were determined not to allow him to evade accountability.
"I didn't do it. I'm serious. I didn't do it. I'm not going to admit to that. I didn't do it. If I did, I admit to it. I didn't do that." "Let me explain your charges." "Go ahead." "Okay. You have 7 counts of aggravated murder."
Stanley's trial commenced on August 30th.
That timeline, his statements, and the similarities of his actions show his opportunity.
When the defendant gets angry with his neighbors, he sets their property on fire and kills them.
And ladies and gentlemen, the evidence, all of that will reveal his identity. And that will show you that when the defendant gets angry with his neighbors, he sets their property on fire and he kills them. And at the conclusion of this case, Mr. LaPrinzi and I are going to ask you to find the defendant guilty of all the charges and all of the specifications.
A lot of the evidence that you're going to be presented to is not disputed.
The defense attempted to undermine the evidence, but the reality was undeniable. Their primary strategy involved redirecting suspicion towards Patrick Boggs, but when Boggs invoked his Fifth Amendment right and refused to testify, the defense found themselves without solid ground.
You knew during the course of your investigation in 2001 that Patrick Boggs tried to set Angela Boggs on fire, correct?
Correct.
Also beat her up, correct?
Correct.
He believed she was cheating on him with a black man, correct?
Correct.
That piqued your interest in this case too because of who Angela Boggs was now dating, fair?
That's correct.
Mental health emerged as a significant aspect of Stanley's defense, with his extreme views being used to argue for his instability. Yet, Stanley firmly dismissed any suggestions of mental illness, stating emphatically, "I don't have any mental problems. I'm not crazy." His refusal to participate in psychological evaluations further illustrated his disconnect from reality.
I'm not saying a doctor, Your Honor. I'm done with that. I'm not saying no more doctor.
Ultimately, the jury deliberated and returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Stanley Ford was convicted of the aggravated murder of 9 victims, which included 5 innocent children. While the defense sought to avoid the death penalty for Stanley, the jury remained resolute. Consequently, Stanley Ford was sentenced to 9 consecutive life sentences, 1 for each victim.
One verdict, 1 aggravated murder regarding Angela Boggs. We, the jury, being duly paneled and sworn and affirmed to well and truly try and do deliverance make between the state of Ohio and the defendant Stanley O. Ford, do find the defendant guilty of the offense of aggravated murder, a charge in the indictment, on or about the 15th day of May 2017.
He would endure a life in solitary confinement, with no chance of parole, left to confront the memories of his heinous actions year after year. For the victims' families, justice had been achieved, though the wounds of that night would never fully heal. The city of Akan would carry the memories of the terror that enveloped them, while Stanley Ford faced the grim reality of the lives he extinguished and the fear he unleashed. Though the nightmare had ended, its memory would forever endure.